How's it going, everybody? This is Ask Me Anything About Politics. So, if you got any questions about politics, just let me know in the chat, and I will do my best to give you a good answer. So, yeah, if you got any questions about politics, just let me know. You don't got to worry about, if it's a dumb question or a simple question. I'm down for answering all your questions, whether they are simple or complicated. I am not the kind of person that believes in making fun of people for trying to learn new information. So, if you don't know what simple things are about the government, if you don't know why voting is important, if you don't know what the filibuster is, this is a great place to ask those questions because I'm not going to judge you regardless of if your question is, simple or complicated, or if just based on what your question is, everybody can tell that you are, what your politics are. Like, I'm not going to judge you based on your politics either. Let's see here. Bit Nevo, thank you for watching my stand up. I appreciate that. All right. If anybody's got any questions about politics, just let me know in the chat and I'll do my best to give you a good answer. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. It can be like trying to learn a new language. And, there's all these political streams where people just like fight with each other. This is not that show. If you have different politics than me, I'm not going to get into a fight with you. I'll just answer any question that you give in good faith. Yeah, I don't believe in that kind of like debating as like being productive for forwarding the conversation. I don't believe in fighting amongst other voters about whose voters are better or worse. It's just about getting people activated and engaged in politics and teaching people the kind of power that they have as citizens and teaching them how the government works and what the government is currently doing. I think all that stuff is really important for people to know. So yeah, I don't care who you voted for. I don't care if you didn't vote at all. I don't care if you're further to the left than me or further to the right than me. I am just here to answer all of your good faith questions about politics. BitNevo says, "What do you think of Trump throwing Pam Bondi under the bus? Will any of them stand up to their boss?" So I haven't heard any news about Pam Bondi being thrown under the bus, so I'm not really sure what you're referring to. But I will say that the New York Times reported that Stephen Miller was basically controlling the Department of Justice from within the White House, which is wildly unethical. I don't know if it's illegal at all, but it's definitely not the way that things are supposed to work. So yeah, I think that Trump probably views Pam Bondi as being completely disposable. Yeah, and I don't really think that he cares about her, being in her position. I'm sure that he has says, "Is there a history of American women presidents? And can women be president in the future?" There is. We've never had a female president in America. And can women be president in the future? Absolutely. Just people have to vote for them. Tyro, what's up? Good to see you again. All right, welcome everybody. This is Ask Me Anything About Politics. If you got any questions about politics, just let me know in the chat, and I'll do my best to give you a good answer. I know that politics could be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. There's all these different three-letter agencies that we just talk about using their abbreviations, and sometimes we just refer to people by their last name. So if you don't know who Bondi or Patel or Hegseth are, maybe you are unaware of what is going on in the government. And also, we like to use terms that we just kind of expect everybody to know, like the filibuster and demagogue and, continuing resolution and, things of that nature. Reconciliation. If you don't know what those things are, where do you go to ask? This is not the kind of show where I make fun of you for not knowing things. There's no roasting, there's no ridicule, and there's no debating. This is not one of those shows where I invite people up who have different political opinions than me and then I just yell at them and try to own them or prove them wrong about stuff. That's not what this show is at all. I am just trying to engage with people in good faith about politics. So if you got any questions whatsoever, maybe you are somebody on the far right who's like, I don't understand why Democrats do this or why the liberals are like that. Maybe I can answer that question for you. Or maybe you're like somebody who is like fiercely anti the two-party system and you're like, how could anybody ever defend the two-party system? I could be a person who maybe potentially answer that question for you. So go ahead, ask me your questions in the chat. There's no roasting, there's no debating. I'm not here to yell at you or get into fights with people on the other side of the aisle. I'm just here to answer all of your good faith questions about politics. Voodoo Witch, good to see you again. What do you think of all the protests and Charlie Kirk at Cambridge? So I don't know about any specific protests surrounding Charlie Kirk, but I'm glad that college kids are protesting him because he's a liar and a fraud. Real Benda says Congress used to be much more cordial, not anymore. What happened? So there was a concerted effort by the right wing of this country to create a sort of like us versus them narrative where, if you look at things like right wing talk radio or Fox News and things like that, it has always been very aggressively, they are wrong, they are stupid, they are bad for America, they're un-American, they're communists, they're socialists, etc. And I have been paying attention to politics since the early 2000s, and so I watched this switch take place where the Democratic Party was trying to be the adults in the room and were saying like, oh, we just disagree with our friends on the other side of the aisle, but there's no reason why we can't work together, blah blah blah. But because of all that rhetoric that was pushed by right-wing media, the base of the party just became more and more radicalized and incensed. You saw this in the 2008 election where John McCain was trying to be an adult Republican, and he was regularly at town halls where people were saying things like Barack Obama is a terrorist and he's a Muslim, and John McCain was, part of a no longer existent wing of the Republican Party who would correct people on those things instead of just saying, yeah, that sounds about right, or what Trump would say is like, we're going to look into that. Don't you worry about that, So, yeah, it is entirely the fault of the right wing in this country and the billionaire class who has tried to get voters fighting amongst themselves to distract from the fact that they are actively ruining our lives with their wealth hoarding and shit like that. Let's see here. Real Benda says Rachel Maddow and MSNBC seem to be responsible as well. I fully disagree with that, Real Benda. I have definitely consumed some Rachel Maddow content and MSNBC content, and there's no comparison to what right-wing media does. There is no calling people, like evil Satanists who are in league with demons and the gay agenda that is trying to turn our kids trans and stuff like that. And it's just my opinion about this. Like, there's data to support this. If you are somebody who consumes right-wing media, you are less well informed than people who don't even watch the news at all. It just doesn't happen. It is that is a false narrative that I will fight. Let's see here. Joni Calder says, how long till this BBB bill is going into effect? So it currently has not passed the Senate. The Senate has some more normal Republicans in it as opposed to the House, which tends to be a little bit more cuckoo bananas. And so they're currently working on, like whether they're going to have a bill that both that Republican House and the Republican Senate can agree on. The Democrats are completely out of this process. They do not have enough seats to actually affect whether or not it passes or not. And they have already declared that they are not going to be, working on any compromises with the Republicans on this because the bill is psychotic and terrible. Now I did see on the news that Republicans scheduled votes for the big, beautiful bill at like 10:30 at night and 1 o'clock in the morning. I think they're trying to get anybody who would stand up against it to just like not show up, to not be there for it. And so, yeah, just more dirty tricks from the Republican Party to try to, cheat and steal their way into political victory. Mr. Triangle says, LOL, Soy Boy wants Harris as president. I mean, I gave your mom some soy last night, but yeah, I do want Harris to be president. We all should. She would have been a way better president. Malin Bates says, fun fact, Donald Trump hasn't beaten a man yet. Yeah, accurate. Decker says, why? You'll have to be more specific than that. You are intentionally being dishonest about 40, 50 years of news coverage dominated by the left. That is inaccurate, Dessers, and I would happily give you some specifics about why you are incorrect about that if you would like. Desser says, we like our Trump 16K individual tax credit that sunsets this year. Dessers, I feel like you are just here to spread misinformation. So unless you start to engage in good faith, I'm going to boot you out of here. But yeah, if you examine political news coverage for the past 40 years, even the mainstream media tends to water down their negative coverage of the Republican Party because they're trying to appear as unbiased as possible, and they often overhype negative coverage of Democratic candidates. There were more negative stories about Al Gore than there were about George W. Bush, and there were more negative stories about Hillary Clinton than there were about Donald J. Trump. And it's not because the Democratic candidates were worse. In fact, they were demonstrably better in both of those races, but the mainstream media tends to skew to the center right in order to try to appear bipartisan. So yeah, and also they're owned by billionaires, and billionaires are in the pocket of the Republican Party. All right, so let's see here. Holly Faruqi says Harris would have been just an extension of Biden. Go Trump, go. Yeah, you say that like it was going to be a bad thing, Holly. And also, you are not asking questions, so you're out of here. I don't care if I have different opinions than me, but actually ask a question. Mandy, Kidwell Parking, good to see you again. Says, I've listened to Fox News, they outright lie. Why isn't that getting fixed? Can anything be done? So we unfortunately have pretty liberal laws around what organizations can say in the news industry and how fact-based they are allowed to be. So long as they are classified as quote-unquote news entertainment, they are able to get away with a lot. And it's really dangerous to try to regulate that, because let's say that we have a Trump in office, but he has a really healthy law behind him that can say what is, he's allowed to say what is accurate or what isn't accurate, and then he could potentially, file a lawsuit against MSNBC or ABC or Fox News or whatever, or not Fox News, obviously. And he's already doing that. Like, he's literally already suing news organizations. Imagine if he had a more robust mechanism by which he could decide what was fake news and what was real news. So yeah, it's difficult to try to write legislation that could not be weaponized by the right under a Republican president. But yeah, I do agree that something needs to be done. And failing anything else, I would just say the same thing that I always do, which is if people like you and me do the work, then we can take the teeth away from Fox News. So we can convince people to not engage in right-wing media and to show them how they are being lied to regularly. All right. Zaya Maruka says, will Elon step down from politics to save Tesla or whatever else he is thinking? I mean, what do I know? I'm just a Malaysian. We can't hold other countries' passports or have other countries' citizenships. I don't really know if Elon is going to, he says he's going to step aside. He says he's not going to do any more political fundraising. I don't really believe anything that him or any other Republican says, because they do a lot of lying. And so whether he's there or not, Doge is going to continue doing damage. Trump is going to continue doing damage. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Let's see here. Angie says, you still doing the cheek spreading ASMR? I spread your mom cheeks last night. Walt Do says, do you have any extremely preliminary midterm predictions? I don't make predictions, but I will tell you what the polls say. The polls right now say that Democrats are going to win the House and that Republicans are going to hold the Senate. But we can change that. If you and I do the work, then we can increase the chances that Democrats win Senate seats. We can increase the margin by which they win House seats. It's up to us, Let's see here. Democrats don't lie. Come on, G. Both sides lie. LOL. No, there's a big difference, Mr. Triangle. There are more and bigger lies that come out of the right, and particularly right-wing media and right-wing politicians, than from the left-wing media and left-wing politicians. All of the data backs that up. So, you can miss me with that both sides stuff, because it's just completely inaccurate. Gigi says, why, after all these actions by Trump and his team, haven't charges for treason? So the reason why during the Trump administration there are not charges for treason is because he is currently in charge of the Justice Department. He has installed people who are fully loyal to him and not the Constitution in the FBI and the DOJ. And there's even reporting to suggest that Stephen Miller is really controlling the Department of Justice from inside the White House, which is grossly unethical, not the way it's supposed to work, potentially illegal. I'm not really sure. So yeah, none of the people that love Trump and want him to continue doing lawless and unconstitutional things are ever going to hold him accountable for the bad things that he does. And that's just not the way that the government is supposed to work. It's supposed to be country over party, but that is not how the Republican Party operates. It is the Republican Party overall, according to them. Tyro Pillar says, taxing revenue off misinformation platforms, can it be a thing? Ooh, that's an interesting idea. Let me get back to that, Tyro. Mr. Triangle says, I think the opposing team in which you're going for will always lie more. Mr. Triangle, that's not based on me. I'm talking about data. I'm talking about non-partisan, unbiased scientists have looked at this information, and they have shown that right-wing channels, right-wing politicians lie more and bigger than left-wing channels and left-wing politicians. So again, this is not me being biased against the right wing of this country. I am just literally telling you what the scientists are saying. Luke Wilson says, any thoughts on the defunding of Harvard? So I don't love higher education. I have read a significant amount of reporting by Malcolm Gladwell on this, where all of these massive institutions have like crazy endowments, and they don't need them. Like they don't need to be constantly charging students all this money to be going to their colleges and just having these billions and billions of dollars of endowments. So as far as like entities that can afford to fight the Trump administration, like Harvard is right up there. Like I am not concerned about them not being able to pay their teachers and pay their electric bill and shit like that when they have billion-dollar endowments and shit like that. And I'm glad that they are. I'm glad that they seem to be holding the front line at this moment. Gigi says, is there any way to get him and them out of office? So Gigi, the main thing is voting and getting other people to vote. Like that's the main thing. That is the one pure curative that we human beings can do in this government to get Trump and other Republicans out of office, is just to vote for Democrats instead. It is an activity that I advocate regularly and passionately, because that is the way that us, the citizens, exercise our power over the people that are in charge. Now, as far as like, we got a midterm election coming up in 2026. In order to remove Trump from office, we would need a majority in the House and 2/3 a majority in the Senate. We already have a pretty good chance of getting majority in the House, but 2/3 majority in the Senate is a difficult thing to do. And pollsters will tell you that it is virtually impossible for that to happen. But impossible things happen in politics all the time. So if people like you and me do the work of informing people about what the government is doing, informing them of the importance of electing Democrats, and getting them to vote for Democrats in the 2026 midterms, it's 100% possible that we would get a 2/3 majority in the Senate and the House and could literally eject Trump from office. Yorkie said, did Democrats lie about Biden's cancer? I have seen exactly zero reporting that is the case. As far as I know, not even Biden knew about his cancer until recently. Tyler Bemis says, why don't the courts deputize new U.S. Marshals if the DOJ is corrupt? That's an excellent question. And as far as I can tell, the judiciary is slowly doing things to try to hold the Trump administration accountable for contempt of court and things like that. But yeah, no one will ever accuse the judicial system of operating too swiftly where the courts are, concerned. So yeah, I'm not really sure what the mechanism would be for that, but I believe the Democrats were actually working on legislation to take the U.S. Marshals out of the purview of Pam Bondi specifically for that. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure about that. Luke Wilson says, why do Democrats say the cancer got the wrong guy when they claim to be the party of love? I'm not really sure who says that, Luke Wilson. I would encourage you not to read things on the internet and ascribe that to the Democratic Party in general. Because as far as I know, nobody is saying that. But if nameless, faceless, anonymous Twitter trolls are saying that and they say that they're left-leaning, they're probably not real people. Kimberly says, Democrats are the party of hate and corruption. That is not true, Kimberly, and also that is not a question, so you are out of here. I don't care if you have different opinions than me, but actually ask a question, be part of the conversation. Let's see here. MAGA averse. Yes, I completely agree with you. 60 seats would be a tall order also, but I say if you're going to punch someone in the face, aim for the back of the head. So let's aim for 67 seats in the Senate and see what we can get. Let's see here. Mr. Louis Casino says, Jared, what's your favorite Trump policy? Looking for a favorite Trump policy is like, sifting through a mountain of shit and looking for like the tiny pieces of silver lining. That being said, we can get rid of the penny, and it seems like the Trump administration is getting rid of the penny. So I'm like, yeah, go for it, man. I'll give you your fucking flowers on that. But 99%, you fucking suck and you're terrible. I'm talking about the Trump administration, not you, whoever asked that question. Tyler Bemis says, what would happen if Trump suspended habeas corpus unilaterally? So he kind of already has. The courts are working on holding him accountable and undoing the hundreds of times that he has already suspended habeas corpus. But if he were to suspend habeas corpus, then the judiciary would have no ability to, for example, undo all of the illegal deportations that the Trump administration has already done. If he suspended habeas corpus, then he would be freer to throw his political rivals in jail, to throw Rachel Maddow in jail, or me in jail, for example, without ever having to provide any evidence or even tell people what crimes we committed. IDK says, I asked for surrender 5 times before we attacked Warsaw. I don't know what you are referring to there. Wal2 says, what if Trump is held in contempt of court? What does that really mean? So unfortunately, Braylon Smith, I do want to answer that question. I'm going to get to that one next. Wal2, unfortunately, the Supreme Court has given Trump the ability to remain legally immune to basically anything that he does while he is in office. That is a decision that the Supreme Court made during the Biden administration in order to shield Trump specifically from legal liability. There is also a department memo that says that sitting presidents can't be indicted. So it is not about holding Trump specifically in contempt, but holding everybody in the Trump orbit in contempt. So like Pete Hegseth or Kash Patel or Dan Bongino or Pam Bondi, like anybody that either facilitated sending people to El Salvador or Libya illegally or South Sudan illegally, or the people that ordered those people to do those things would then be held to consequence for doing that. Braylon Smith says, why does our government want to keep us divided? So our government doesn't want to keep us divided. Billionaires want to keep us divided. And the Republican Party wants to keep us divided. Because if you're focused on your perceived enemy of other voters, then you're not focused on what they are actually doing to ruin your life and fuck everything up. The billionaire class wants you fighting amongst yourselves. They want left voters fighting against right voters. They want progressive Democrats fighting against centrist Democrats. They want Republicans to believe that their enemy is Democrats or trans kids or immigrants so that people don't recognize that billionaires are the problem and that Republican parties are working with them to enact the billionaire agenda. So yeah, I don't encourage that at all. I don't fight with right-wing people on my channel. I try not to. I used to in the past, but I really try not to going forward because that really is the thing. That really is what billionaires want. They want us to go on the internet and say that MAGA voters are stupid, and they want MAGA voters to go out there and say that liberals are evil, and et cetera, et cetera. All right, scrolling down to the bottom. Bailey Renee says, do you feel like MAGA is waking up at all? I wouldn't say that MAGA is waking up at all. There is a core of the Republican base that is so fully in the bubble of right-wing misinformation that there is literally nothing that Trump can do that will get them out of that stupor. That doesn't mean those people are stupid or, more gullible than everybody else. But if you were born into that family, going to that church, looking at that Facebook feed, you would potentially fall for that bullshit as well. Now, but that means that the hardest core of the Republican base is, out of reach so long as the fire hose of right-wing misinformation is fucking soaking them from toe to tip. But there are a ton of other voters out there that potentially are waking up to what the Trump administration is doing. The Trump administration only got 23% of the vote. That it's enough to win an election because 85 million people who could have voted did not. But yeah, there are many more groups of people besides Democrats and MAGA. The variety of voters and non-voters that we have in this country it's wild. It is a very eclectic mix. And so yeah, we might not be reaching MAGA voters, but we are potentially reaching people who thought that Trump would be better for Gaza, or that Trump would be good for the economy, or that not voting would be a vote against the two-party system, et cetera, et cetera. IDK says abolish AIPAC, TAPAC America. Yeah, I don't really love AIPAC, so I'm down with whatever, I'm down with whatever, legislation we can pass that can either defang or dissolve AIPAC. Malin Bates says Trump told MAGA he'd bring businesses back while literally selling them Chinese MAGA merch. Smart. Yeah, he is a grifter and a con man. No new information there. Tyler Bemis says, do you think midterms would be a free and fair election? Republicans are passing new election laws. So that is a concern, Tyler. 100% that is a concern. The Republican Party has been doing a lot of very shady shit in regards to voter suppression and electioneering for a long time, closing down polling locations in Democratic areas, passing voter ID laws, and then closing DMVs so that people can't get driver's licenses in Democratic areas. Misinformation, propaganda, infusing billions of dollars of dark money into our information cycle in order to convince people to either vote for Republicans or not vote at all. It is scary. And yes, they are trying to continue to pass. It is, I think, probably unlikely that things will pass, federally. It is much more concerning if you live like in a swing district and, your elections are being controlled by Republicans at the moment. Then you have to be like really careful. Now, the solution for that is the same solution that it is for everything, which is that people like you and me need to convince people to get out there and vote for Democrats. And if we can win the election in such a wide margin that their bullshittery has no effect, that's how we actually win. But yeah, there are a lot of electoral reforms that this country needs in order to have more free and more fair elections going forward. It is extremely concerning. And so I would hope that the fear of us not being able to vote anymore, or elections being fully rigged by the Republican Party, would inspire people to be activated and to do the work. Let's see here. Bailey Renee says, have you seen the report showing that the 24 election had irregular patterns? I have seen that, Bailey Renee. If I'm giving my honest opinion, it's always read like hopium to me. Hopium is the drug that people give each other on social media to convince them that everything is going to be okay. Sorry, I'm laughing at one of my regulars, making fun of me for mentioning the book Dark Money. But yeah, there's no definitive evidence that the election was rigged. There is a lot of supporting evidence that it was not rigged. A lot of the data lines up. A lot of the soft audits have lined up as well. So until somebody can show me a smoking gun and that ignites the American public in order to undo all of the election, I think that it's best to completely ignore that shit and just focus on 2026. All right, scrolling down to the bottom, Tyler Bemis says, do you think election turnout for midterms will be bigger than usual? It will if people like me and you do the work. Lamar Davis says, is communism bad? Communism isn't in itself bad. Any company that is owned by employees in this country is communist. That is what the principle of communism is. When people tell you that communism is evil, it's important to recognize that they might have a completely different definition of what communism is. It's completely worthless when you have people on the right telling you that communism is evil, that Russia is communist and Venezuela is socialist, and that's the reason why it's bad, when none of those things are true. So it's also true that communism doesn't need to be all or nothing, the same way socialism doesn't have to be, or capitalism doesn't have to be. Any thing that we pay for in this country using tax dollars that benefit everybody, like paved roads and the fire department, that is socialism. I think that we have a little bit too little socialism and communism in this country. Like, I'd much rather have a model like they have in Norway and Denmark and Canada and shit like that. But yeah, what do you call it? It's a problem with agreeing on a definition and also recognizing that it's not all or nothing. Tyler Bemis says, why is Christian nationalism so popular right now? Because billionaires want it to be, and they are in control of the information environments, particularly social media. They have pushed that ideology onto exactly the kind of people who will fall for it, and everybody else they're just trying to fracture. They're trying to sell you that, all right, the progressive Dems, your enemy is the centrist Dems, the centrist Dems, your enemy is the progressive Dems. The problem is Nancy Pelosi. The problem is Chuck Schumer, and the problem is they're too extreme on the left and not Look at all this money that we're putting into pushing propaganda narratives that get Republicans elected. GG2 says, but by 2026 midterms, won't we be fully under a dictatorship? Not if you and I do the work, GG. That is the fucking the center of my entire live streams is getting people to recognize that if we do the work, we can stop it. But if we just sit around and wait for other people to save us, then we're fucked. Then we're going to continue spiraling into authoritarianism. Tyro, just wanted to give you a shout out for your hilarious dark money bit over there. Don't private schools get subsidized by taxpayers? I believe in some districts they do, where school vouchers are a thing, but I believe it is sort of a district by district, policy sort of a thing. Yeah. Taxing revenue off misinformation platforms, can it be a thing? I suppose it could, Tyro, but I worry that who gets to decide what is misinformation? Like whatever legislation gets passed, it needs to be worded extremely carefully so that it cannot be weaponized by the right. As we were seeing with the Trump administration, like they don't really give a shit what the law says. So, on the one hand, if you elect in a bunch of fascist pieces of shit who are going to ignore the law, it doesn't really matter what the law says because they're just going to do whatever the fuck they want, The emoluments clause is a thing that they're fully ignoring. It's way more important to just elect regular ass, people who will follow the law, I guess, than in writing new laws that the Trump administration could potentially ignore. So yeah, it's a balancing act. I don't know what the solution is to that. GG2 says, tell me what I should start doing to prevent the dictatorship. Excellent question, GG2. So this is what I refer to as the work. It is a big bucket of stuff that we all should be doing. You don't have to do all of it. You can kind of focus on the things that you want to do instead, but we have to be doing the work and also recruiting other people to do the work. The full list of what the work is on my Discord. So if you join my Discord, you can find it. It's one of the pinned threads, but I'll give you a quick rundown of what the work is right now. The work is, number one, talking to people in real life. You got to make sure that people that your friends, your family, your coworkers, your neighbors, the people that already know and love you and respect you, make sure that they know what the government is doing, the ways that they are failing, the ways that they are threatening people like you and me and the people that you care about. You got to convince them to vote for Democrats if they are not already voting for Democrats. You got to convince them to vote if they're not already voters. And if they're already on board with the process, you got to convince them to be part of the process of recruiting other people so that we can spread throughout. This is like a phone tree, like we got to make sure that the people that we talk to are also talking to people. We also got to make sure that people are getting real information, make sure that they're not stuck in any sort of like propaganda or misinformation rabbit holes. There are people in my social circle who I have had to, disabuse of certain notions, even though they're left-leaning, politically. I have had very smart people who are engaged in politics tell me things like the Democratic Party could have codified Roe so many times in the past, they just chose not to. That is a lie. Shit like that. The Harris campaign would have been exactly as bad for Gaza as Trump is right now. That is also a lie. We need to be disabusing people of that notion. That's sort of like group number one. Group number two of the work is doing the things that citizens have always been able to do, which is strike, protest, boycott, and put political pressure on our elected representatives. That means calling their offices, faxing their offices, going to their offices. They work for us, and so they have to listen to us. They have to hear our feedback. If you join a group like Indivisible, they can teach you how to form political action groups in order to be more effective at this. But you also don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can join Indivisible and just join whatever groups already exist. You can work with groups like Run for Something or Vote Save America. That is also part of the work. And step three, which I'm trying to actually remember what step three is. I can't remember what step three is, but it's on my Discord, so go ahead and check that out. Timmy Tim 821 says, was you kicked off TikTok for a week or did I not see you? I have been falsely reported for misinformation by people on the right because they do not like me coming on here and telling the truth. So yeah, there have been times when I have been booted off. I often appeal. I regularly win, but sometimes I'm lost for a week. But if you missed me for a week, it was most likely because I was on the road doing stand-up. That was the time most recently when I was not on regularly. But now I'm back. I'm back at home, and I'm back at my regular streaming schedule, which for those of you who are new is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. Malin Bates says, talk to people, spread the truth, engage the political process. I like that. Braylon Smith says, I don't trust the news. Where can I find more reliable information on what is happening? So Braylon Smith, I think that you need to give news more credit, because mainstream news, legacy news, left-leaning news, independent news, foreign news, that all has more legitimacy than anything that you could possibly see on social media. You know, social media is the fucking Wild West as far as getting accurate information about anything, about science, about diet, about politics specifically. And the billionaire class are very good at filtering specific propaganda narratives to you that will either convince you to vote for Republicans or not vote at all. So maybe you're not the kind of person who would fall for Charlie Kirk's bullshit, but maybe you're the kind of person that would fall for the both parties are the same bullshit. And so they, you know, the algorithms are really good at finding what you will buy and what you will believe. So yeah, the key to, you know, filtering out misinformation is to get your news from various sources. You know, like use some legacy media like the New York Times, use some centrist media like the Associated Press, use some foreign media like the BBC or the Guardian UK. There is more substantive media like the Atlantic, like longer articles is great. And you know, every time I do a live, I always make a pitch for progressive media, which is unabashedly left-leaning in its reporting, but that does not mean that they are inaccurate or biased. That just means that they are accurately calling out the Republican Party for being as dangerous and extreme as they are, whereas centrist media will sort of like water down their, you know, reporting on the right in order to appear as unbiased as humanly possible. So MSNBC, Crooked Media, like, I find that news to be way more accurate, and it's not like they don't say negative things about the Democratic Party or Democratic politicians. They do, you know? So it's like left doesn't get a tongue bath anywhere the way that the right gets a tongue bath on Fox News. Meat Soda says, blue isn't better, minorities are just tokens for them. That is inaccurate, Meat Soda. Please ask a question or I will boot you. But yeah, that is a very inaccurate thing that you just said, Meat Soda. User Gibbs says Democrats have been weaponizing social media for decades. That is inaccurate. User Gibbs XXX. Democrats have been using social media, but social media companies are owned by billionaires, and billionaires are incentivized financially to support the Republican Party. Let's see here. Ty USA says, nah, just watch Rogan and Glenn Greenwald. No, those are not good news sources to me. Malin Bates says, seems rhetorical to me. I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Bailey Renee says, how to educate non-voters that we know. I find it hard combating disinformation. So if you're more interested in that, there's a book called The Persuaders about people that do this work. And the key is, the short version is, you got to meet people where they are. You got to do more listening than talking. You need to talk to them for a long time. It's hard work to actually engage with somebody and push the needle. And also recognize that you don't need to take a MAGA supporter and turn them into an AOC progressive. All you gotta do is push the needle a little bit. Sometimes all it takes is convincing somebody like, hey, it's weird that you and I have completely different versions of what is going on in the world just based on where we read the news. Isn't that weird? Can we agree on that at least? Ty USA says, do you support Israel? I support the citizens of Israel, and I support the citizens of Palestine. I do not support the extreme right-wing government of Israel, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, who is a corrupt piece of shit who is guilty of doing war crimes. I also do not support Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, which is also guilty of war crimes. Meat Soda says, what do you think of minorities voting for Republicans? I'm FTM, and I voted for them. What's FTM, Meat Soda? You know, every human being is susceptible to misinformation and propaganda. So minorities are not worse or more stupid than white people who have been tricked to vote Republican. But I think that it is even less in their best interest to vote for Republicans than white people, than poor white people, for example. But what do you mean by FTM? Let's see here. Both sizing people deserves taint splinters from MAGA-verse. Remember, we're being nice here. Remember, that's what this channel is, my man. Alrighty. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the live stream. If you got any questions about politics, just let me know in the chat. Meat Soda, let me know what FTM means. It's fine, MAGAverse. We all slip from time to time. Female to male, maybe? I don't know. Oh, a trans person, potentially. That could potentially be what they mean, yeah. So yeah, let me know, Meat Soda. All right, yeah. Any questions? Just let me know in the chat, everybody. I am here to answer all of your questions, regardless of if you are further to the left than me or further to the right than me. This is not the kind of channel where I yell at you for different political opinions than me. I am just here to answer all of your questions about politics in good faith, regardless of if you are left, right, or center. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it, and you can sometimes feel like you don't know where to turn. It's like trying to learn a new language, because we use a lot of shorthand when we talk about politics. Like we talk about three-letter agencies without explaining what they are or what they do. The department of the government that takes care of everything on the outside is called the Department of the Interior, which is very confusing. Sometimes we just refer to people by their last names, and it's like if you don't know who Patel or Bondi or Hegseth is, then where do you go to find that information? Thai USA says Democrats love war. Democrats equals neocon. That is inaccurate, Thai USA. Also, you have not asked a question, so you are out of here. I don't care if you have different opinions than me, but actually ask a question. Javi and Kermit says, is it safe to call this administration a regime? I don't know if I would go there yet. They're certainly acting like a regime, but I don't even know what would constitute that. Like, are we saying that they are more like a fascist regime or more like a coup, because of the things that they have done and said and the way that they're acting already? Yeah, potentially, but yeah, I'm not really sure. All right, if anybody's got any questions, let me know in the chat. My name is Jared. I'm not here to yell at people for your political opinions. I just answer questions in good faith. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it, so this is a safe space where you can ask your questions about politics, and you don't got to worry about getting yelled at or ridiculed or anything like that. This is not one of those shows where I invite people on the right up and then I yell at them and I own them and I prove to them how stupid they are. It is not that show whatsoever. Gen X Marnie says, not a regime, but an authoritarian figure. Yeah, definitely. That's what they want. Whether they're accomplishing it or not, that's what they want. They want to be authoritarian. They want to be dictators, and that should be enough. I definitely heard people. Oh, it's pronounced Javi. All right, Javi, good to meet you. Let's see here. Jayla Garcia says you can say Dean's name. Dean is not the only offender. You also got people like Destiny and Vosh and Hassan. Like all these people. And I don't hate what they're doing at all. Anything that gets young people interested in politics, especially left-leaning politics, I say all for it. I just think that we need this also. What I'm doing. Let's see here. All right, birds are really, really real. Says, does the Democratic Party need to change as drastically as the Republican Party did? I am for leaning into the younger progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Now, I'm sure that there are pollsters out there who will tell you that in certain states and certain districts that would be political suicide. I am not really convinced by that argument all that much. I think it would be in the Democratic Party's best interest to lean more into younger progressives as opposed to the more centrist gerontocracy that believes in things like seniority above, meritocracy. That is what I advocate for, but I am not going to predict or say that the Democratic Party is crazy for not doing that or that they're only going to lose elections going forward, because even an 80-year-old centrist Democrat is better than any Republican. Let's see here. Peace and Love says, what's the difference between the House and the Senate? So the House is many more people, and the Senate is fewer people. The House is much more representative of people's, population size, so you'll have 100 districts in California versus only 2 districts in Delaware or something like that. There are 400 plus members in the House. There are only 100 members in the Senate because the Senate is 2 people from every state, regardless of how many or few people are in that state. Because of the makeup of the states, it is a massive disadvantage to Democrats to try to get control of the Senate, because there are more states that are, that have a smaller population picking a more conservative senator than there are Democratic states being able to do that. And that has nothing to do with, whose ideology or platform is better. It's just a consequence of electioneering and propaganda. So yeah, and they have different responsibilities. Like the House is more in control of finances. The Senate is more in control of sitting nominees. They are in charge of making sure that, vetting judicial nominees or, like nominees for Trump's cabinet. Like the Senate needs to vote on who gets to be the head of the Department of Justice and who gets to be the head of the FBI and stuff like that. Let's see here. GG2 says, "How do we find your Discord?" I'm pretty sure I linked to it like in all of my stuff. But if you go to my website, the link will be there. I'm pretty sure if you go to my bio, the link is there somewhere. I'm not really sure. Let's see here. But if my DMs are open and you can email me through my website. So if you can't find the link anywhere, just let me know and I will send you a link as well. Meat Soda says, "Do you think the Dems lack understanding of the public? Would it be a reason why Kamala lost?" I don't believe so, Meat Soda. Also, let me know what FTM is. I asked you that a long time ago, Meat Soda, and you never answered me. So yeah, I'll tell you exactly why I think Democrats did poorly in the last election. It has to do, number one, with incumbency bias, which was felt all around the globe. Everybody was angry at the post-COVID inflation, which was caused by not Democrats or necessarily anybody who was in charge in 2024, but people were upset. And all around the globe, whether they were left, right, or center, whoever was in charge suffered electoral consequences in 2024. That's number one. But the biggest one is billionaire-funded propaganda that was convincing people to either vote for Republicans or not vote at all. That, I think, is the main thing. If somebody pays attention to the news, they tend to vote for Democratic politicians by a favor of 80 to 20. So what does that tell you? Number one, that the facts are on the side of the Democratic Party, because people that are actually up to speed on what's going on know what's up and they vote for Democrats. That's number one. Number two is the majority of people don't read the news, though. They get their news off of social media. And so, we have this big group of people who are extremely squishy, who, if you're not reading the news, you are able to be persuaded of X, Y, or Z just by pushing certain content to them. And billionaires are really good at this. They're really good at weaponizing social media in order to find the exact propaganda that will convince you to either vote for Republicans or not vote at all. We saw a lot of this coming out of Russia, and this is now a playbook that the worst people with the most money now have available to them. And so that is part of the reason why I advocate for people to do this work in person, because we are not going to be able to fight against them online because they just have too much money. They have too much money and too much influence over what people see in their news feeds. Alrighty, let's see here. Javi and Kermit says, "Thoughts on a two-party system? Do you think there's room for change in the system?" Okay, so number one, there is. But until we get ranked choice voting, any other party besides the main two will only serve to be a spoiler candidate going forward. And we have seen this weaponized in the past, where you got really extremely sketchy people like, the Green Party, what's her name? I forget what her name is, but she was basically getting money from Russia in order to be a spoiler candidate for Democrats here in America. So that's number one. Number two is the Republican Party is hostile towards ranked choice voting because they know that it would make other parties competitive against them. And this is not rhetoric, guys. You can look this up at your leisure. It is House Resolution 3040, Republicans trying to ban ranked choice voting. So if you want to open up the two-party system, you have to vote for Democrats, because Democrats are the only party that are going to be open to having ranked choice voting and opening up the process to other political parties. And then all of that being said, I don't really believe the two-party system is as guilty for all of the faults in America as people seem to want to ascribe it to. Jill Stein, thank you, Badger75. I don't think it's great, but I also don't think it's as bad as people say that it is. Rhonda, yeah, I don't really believe what you just said there. Peggle Hunter says, Democratic Party is dying faster than 46. All right, well, you're not here in good faith. Let's see here. Meat Soda says, hey, so to answer your question, Jarrett, I'm a trans man. That's what FTM means. So Meat Soda, how do you feel about all of the anti-trans legislation that the Republican Party is pushing, both at the state and local level and at the federal level? Like, how do you feel about the way that Republican Party politicians and Donald Trump are trying to, engineer the government to be anti-trans? Like, how does that affect the feelings that you have towards how you voted in the past? Peggle Hunter says Soros has more money than Russia. That is wildly inaccurate. And also, you are blocked. Thank God I've blocked you already. Let's see here. Chris 10 says, yes, ranked choice voting, overturn Citizens United, universal health care, end stock trading in Congress. Chris, those are all parts of the Democratic platform. So I hope that you are passionate about supporting Democratic candidates so that we can get all of those policies passed. And the word for black in Spanish, 473, says, why can we just vote directly for president instead of just using delegates? Not trustworthy. So this is, honestly, we're almost an hour in. I'm kind of tired. I gotta punt on that question because I'm just a little too exhausted to get into that one, Mr. 473. But it has a history in potentially appeasing slave-owning states. If you want to read more about the Electoral College and why it sucks, you should Google a woman named Kate Shaw Electoral College, because she wrote an excellent essay about this that I could not even try to summarize as well as she put it in her extremely short essay. So please go and Google that instead. John says, ask me anything as long as host agrees with you. Nope, that is not what the show is. I don't care if you disagree with me, so long as you ask a question and be part of the conversation, John Need. And test me, man. Test me. Ask me fucking anything. And if it's a question, I'll engage with you. But if it's not, if you just spam in the comments with, you just said BS. That's not a question, my man. I'll give you one more. That's not a question before I boot you. But let's see here. Yeah, man. There are plenty of people who are right wing or centrist or whatever who ask questions, and I answer them without booting them. But again, if you just spam the comments with right wing propaganda, I will boot you. Pama says, what's your opinion on the march in Atlanta? I mean, I don't know what specific march you're referring to, but I am for citizens exercising their right to protest and free speech. Let's see here. Claire says, I understand Democrats' anger towards President Biden right now for getting old. He didn't run. So, Claire, I'm with you. Biden is an extremely old man. He did a lot of good, but I fully understand why people are angry at him. He basically handed the election to the Republicans by running for a second term. He was not up for it. According to Jake Tapper, him and the people in his inner circle were hiding how much he had become old in office. And because he only gave Kamala Harris 100 days to mount her campaign, she was kneecapped. It was impossible for her to teach America who she was and what she stood for, because she had too short of a runway. So yeah, I fully understand people being angry at Joe Biden. I think that him deciding to run and him continuing to send weapons and money to Israel after they've been found guilty of war crimes are massive sins that I think that we have to be honest about. We have to be honest about the terrible things that Joe Biden did, the same way that we ring the bell about all the good that him and his administration did from 2020 to 2024. All right, John Need says, so how can you not agree with Trump's border policies while Biden allowed criminals in? John Need, so Biden did not allow criminals in. He wasn't saying, please, criminals, come into our country. The border was not open during the during the Biden administration. That's misinformation. That's not true. And also, the Trump border policy is not decreasing illegal immigration. It is just making legal immigration almost impossible for anybody who isn't rich or white. And I do not think that it is a valuable border policy. We are not keeping criminals out of this country. In fact, the Trump administration just escorted a bunch of cartel family members into this country from Mexico. Additionally, if you are somebody who's done a bunch of crimes, if you just buy, $10 million worth of Trump coin, then he will pardon you. So if you really care about criminals being in this country, how do you feel about the fact that Trump is pardoning criminals just because they give him a whole bunch of money? That should be something that really upsets you. But man, let's see here. Meat Soda says, well, I believe trans rights are important. I voted for Trump for the economy and not trusting Democrats. So Meat Soda, do you think that Trump has done a good job with the economy? Because, mostly people agree that he has not, that the market is crashing, that goods are going to be becoming more expensive, that shelves are going to be empty soon. That companies don't know what to do because the tariffs are on, the tariffs are off, the tariffs are on, the tariffs are off. Like, do you feel like that was good policy? Meat soda. Oi. All right, Johnny. See, I have proven to you that I don't block people who have different opinions than me. Congratulations. Mm-mm-mm. And meat soda, I don't know why you would not trust Dems. Democrats are human beings just like you and me. They make mistakes, but they are way more trustworthy than the Republican Party. Let's see here. Still don't think America is ready for a woman president. I do. I think we probably would have had a female president if it was not for billionaire propaganda. Ooh, shit! I accidentally blocked all my other comments over here. Don't send the military to the border just to deploy socially awkward men along the border. That will do it. Not bad. You're a neighborly sheet poster. Not bad at all. Tyro Pillar says, you taking the free Harvard classes for funsies? I would. I just don't have time right now. Do you think MAGA will wear get well shirts? That's pretty funny, Tyro. I'll give you that. Let's see here. Okay, I won't lie. I don't think he's doing a good job. Yeah, that's fine, Meat Soda. I'm not here to wag my finger at you or tell you that you were wrong or stupid for voting the way that you did. A lot of people thought the way that you did, and they thought that because billionaires incepted that idea into our head because billionaires wanted their taxes cut and they wanted regulations cut for their companies. Are you aware, Meat Soda, also that the Trump administration is cutting regulations around pollution and making sure that our water is safe to drink and our air is safe to breathe and making sure that our food is safe to eat? Did you know that because of cuts to the CDC, that there are currently outbreaks of salmonella and measles and tuberculosis and bird flu that they're just not able to report on because of how much their budget has been cut and how many people have been fired? Doesn't that concern you? Because that really concerns me. Like, I'm concerned about, I want my food to be safe to eat and my water to be safe to drink. And I want to know if there's a fucking, outbreak of some deadly disease out there and I should be being concerned and I should be like wearing a mask and shit like that, All right. Let's see here. So if the election were held today, Meat Soda, would you vote the same way? Do you have any plans for how you're going to vote in the midterms, Meat Soda? Ruthless Valor says Democrats poison everything. That is not a question, Ruthless Valor. And so you are out of here. All right. I'm losing my voice, guys. Chris says, I want medical research to continue. Yeah. The Trump administration has cut massively into our ability to do scientific research in this country, both technologically and medically. And that fucking sucks. I hate that. It's terrible. It's infuriating. We should be voting for Democrats, if only just to instate that. Let's see here. I believe if the Republicans propose a better candidate, I'm out for them, but it depends. All right. I hope that you come back, Meat Soda, because I would love to engage with you more on this. You can probably tell that I do not believe that Republicans have any good policies, and so I always vote against them. But yeah, let's engage on this. But I got to wrap things up because I'm pretty tired in my throat. I can tell that my voice is going. But thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for the gifts and the shares and the likes and the comments. I cannot do this show without you guys here asking questions. So thank you so much for being here. If you want to support me financially, you can, but you don't have to. I got a Patreon. I got a store. You can send gifts and subscribe on the various channels and stuff like that. If there were any questions that you want me to get more into or that I was not able to answer or that you think of later, my DMs are open. And also you can email me through my website. My regular schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. And lastly, my heartfelt plea for you guys to do the work. Do the work. Recruit other people to do the work, talk to people in real life, put pressure on your elected representatives, and, let's not sleep on this shit, because if we do the work, then we get out of this, and if we all do the work, then nobody has to do a lot of work. All right, everybody, have a good week. I'll see you tomorrow, same bad time, same bad channel. Take care. Bye-bye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye.